This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast, I'll be looking over the game against Watford by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic and James McArthur after the game. So let's begin. Palace edged another point closer to safety as they claimed a goalless draw at Vicarage Road against Watford in the proverbial game of two halves. The woodwork was struck 3 times in the game, with Stefano Lukaku heading into the crossbar after only a matter of minutes, during a first half that the hosts enjoyed the better of. But after the break, Palace were much improved, with Luka Milivojevic and James Tomkins both being thwarted by the bar and post respectively. However, neither side could find a way to break the deadlock, ensuring that they had to settle for a point apiece, which leaves the Eagles 6 points clear of the relegation zone with 3 games left to play. The first half was a disappointing affair for the Eagles, with their opponents enjoying much more possession in dangerous areas and thus a possession of opportunities, which began after just 2 minutes when Will Hughes screwed wide when well placed. 60 seconds later, Palace enjoyed a stroke of luck when Troy Deeney's cross was met powerfully by the head of Lukaku, but the Italian international's header clattered off the corner of Wayne Hennessy's goal frame. And that fortune continues to be pushed when Deeney fizzed a low cross shot into the box that tempted Joe Ward to dangle a leg at, but thankfully Hennessy was on alert to prevent it from creeping into his net. The Welshman was the only shot stopper being tested, and although he wasn't stretched too much to save a weak Craig Cathcart attempt after a corner wasn't effectively cleared, nor Robert Pereira's blast from the edge of the area which fizzed over the crossbar, the host continued to control proceedings as a scrappy first half, littered with niggly fouls and misplaced passes from both sides, continued. Palace's only response came on 35 minutes when Tomkins tamely nodded a free kick straight at Cornelius, but even after that the chances continued to fall to the Hornets, and Hughes would fire over before Deeney shot straight at Hennessy as the sluggish opening 45 minutes for Palace came to a close. After the restart, Hodgson's team began to work through the gears, and on 61 minutes they nearly found a way to edge back in front. Wilfried Zaha won a free kick right on the edge of the box which Milivojevic stepped up to take, and wrapped his effort against the same piece of woodwork struck by Lukaku in the first half, with the rebound eluding all Eagles inside the congested penalty area. There was a moment of controversy when during another scramble inside the box, Adrian Mariappa slid into Zaha and brought the winger to the ground, but under pressure from the home fans baying for blood, Chris Kavanagh booked the Ivorian for a dive instead of pointing to the spot. But still Palace pushed, and once again the woodwork was rattled on 69 minutes when Tomkins met a Young-by corner and saw his downward header bounce off the turf and into the post, with Cornelius scrambling across his line. And Deeney managed to hoof the ball away in the nick of time, with Mamadou Sakho primed to fire it home. That ensured the tension increased as the game remained on a knife edge, and Rosales incurred a shot from close range over the crossbar, and then Hennessy got down quickly to deny the Brazilian the game with 10 minutes remaining, when he was slipped in on the left to pull the trigger. As time ticked away, neither team could conjure up the moment of magic needed to claim all 3 points, but Palace did extend their unbeaten run at Vicarage Road to 7 games, stretching back to 2009. Crystal Palace are a step closer to securing their Premier League status after a 0-0 draw with Watford on Saturday. The Eagles held firm under intense pressure in the first half at Vicarage Road, before having chances of their own in the second half, with Luka Milivojevic and James Tomkins both hitting the woodwork. Palace also had a penalty appeal turned down, with Wilfried Zaha instead receiving a yellow card for diving from referee Chris Kavanagh. But what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things. Number 1. What is it about Wilfried Zaha and Watford? There is a history when it comes to Wilfried Zaha and Watford. From the Championship Player Final in 2013, where Zaha won the penalty that Kevin Phillips scored to fire Palace to promotion, to the mocking of Zaha by Watford mascot Harry the Hornet last season, there has been previous occasions when the Watford fans have made their feelings known towards the Palace star. but it was particularly evident yesterday with Watford supporters booing every time the ball was remotely near Zaha. There were two separate occasions where Zaha went down in the box, with Watford supporters cheering loudly when the Palace man was booked for diving by referee Chris Kavanagh as he went down in the box under a challenge from Adrian Mariappa. Palace boss Roy Hodgson suggested afterwards that Zaha received unfair treatment, adding that he felt it was a clear penalty and in another game he would have got the decision. Number 2. Doucouré is a lucky boy. When Wilfried Zaha went down in the box towards the end of the first half, there were accusations of diving from the Watford fans and players. But no one was more vocal than the Hornets midfielder Adebay Doucouré, who ran over to Zaha to remonstrate with the Ivory Coast international, causing a flashpoint between the pair. Hands were raised as they clashed, and both players could, and perhaps should have been booked. Neither, however, was shown a yellow card, with referee Chris Kavanagh instead opting to have a word with both before sending them away. This was particularly fortunate for Doucouré, who had already been booked and could have easily been sent away for an early bath. Number 3. Should Mariappa have seen red? Doucouré may have been fortunate, but the same could be said about former Palace defender Adrian Mariappa. He was the man making a challenge on Zaha in the second half when the Palace star was booked, and he was already on a yellow card, having been booked just 2 minutes earlier. Several pundits have said, like Palace boss Roy Hodgson, that the decision should have gone in Zaha's favour, and if it had, Kavanagh would have had another decision to make, with Mariappa already on a yellow card. Number 4. Shot shy Palace. Palace were largely under the cosh in the first half, with Watford dominating possession and territory, having 11 shots in the first 45 minutes. In contrast, Palace only had 1 shot on target in the whole game, although they did hit the woodwork twice and on another day could have come away with all 3 points. The Eagles had 6 shots in total, comparing to Watford's 14, and as Hodgson said, would have scarcely deserved more than a point had they snatched a win. And number 5, the stars of the show. On a day where Palace were forced to defend for large periods, the 2 central defenders were superb. James Tomkins once again underlined his importance to the team, with another commanding display at the heart of the defence alongside Mamadou Sakho. Together, the duo typified Palace's resilience under considerable pressure in the first half, making a number of crucial interceptions, blocks and clearances between them. And their efforts didn't go unnoticed, with Palace fans full of praise for the pair on social media. So I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join in with discussions and also share your opinions with other fans. And much like a forum, it's a great place to upload any videos, photos and any news articles you found online that you want to share with other Palace fans. Then of course the Facebook group is the place to go. So like I said there, if you are someone who wants to get, follow a page to get all the latest Palace news, then of course do feel free to follow us on both our Twitter and Facebook pages, because we do regularly update it with the latest news, photos and also obviously opinions from a few admins. But also obviously the Facebook group as well is a place where you can share your opinion. So if you are someone who likes to have your opinion heard, or likes to read what other fans are saying, or you just want another place to get all the latest Palace news, then of course do feel free to join our Facebook group as well. Now, if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then another great place to share your opinion of the game is in the comments below. So if you are listening on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players' performances from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. And even if you are a Watford fan or a Palace fan, even if you don't want to comment below with your player ratings, then do just comment below along with your views of the game. And this is so that instead of me just having my opinion of the game, I can go into the comments section and read what other fans had to say about the game, and of course compare that opinion to my own. But also any Watford or Palace fans who come to the podcast, they don't just listen to my opinion in the podcast, but they can also read what other fans thought about the game. And of course, much like a Facebook group, you can of course have discussions in the comment section below. So if you are someone who has a different opinion to mine on the game, then of course do feel free to comment that below as well. And if you do want to compare your player ratings to mine, then of course feel free to also comment them below. Now, if you do want to follow any of these social media pages and of course join the Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I am going to give a 7. Was alert to prevent an own goal as Joe Ward almost diverted Troy Deeney's centre into his own goal. Didn't have too many saves to make, but did his job well. So Wayne Hennessy here, I've given him a 7, and this has been quite a reoccurring thing over the last few weeks, because I've actually thought that Hennessy, since new goalkeeping coach has come in and since sort of the beginning of the season, he's progressively been getting better, and actually over the last sort of month or so, he's actually had pretty solid performances. Now, obviously, I talked about the game last weekend, and I talked about the fact that he wasn't really troubled that much, and of course, other than the 2 goals Brighton scored, he weren't really troubled. So of course, he's having a quiet game against Brighton. And although it was sort of similar here against Watford in the fact that he didn't have too much to do and didn't really have that many saves to make, he obviously made saves when he had to, which were quite crucial, and that's why I've given him a 7. Now, the first save he made was an absolutely superb one. Obviously, Joe Ward had an absolute terrible game, and I'll talk about him later. But he's, Troy Deeney's got into the box, put a centre into, in front of the goal. And Joe Ward, rather than clearing it up the field, he's managed to clear it to Hennessy. And on another day, if Hennessy was in the wrong position or Hennessy didn't have his hands ready, Hennessy wouldn't have been there to catch it and make that save. And then it would have been an own goal from Joe Ward. So of course the defending was bad there in terms of rather than clearing instead of clearing Troy Deeney's centre, Joe Ward decided to hit it back to Wayne Hennessy, which probably would have been an own goal. But obviously Hennessy, being alert, was able to make a save there. So although that wasn't a fantastic save, the fact that he's able to actually recover from other players' mistakes and actually keep Palace in the game is the thing that's really important for me. And in terms of keeping us in the game, the few saves he did make, which were fantastic, were obviously quite important in terms of us keeping that 0-0 clean sheet. But other than that, like I've said already, he didn't really have too many saves to make. So much like the games in recent weeks where the defence has played so well that actually the goalkeeper hasn't really had much to do. But I still think when called upon, he did his job well. And I criticised him last week for his kicking, saying it was a bit off. It improved quite a lot here against Watford, so showing that maybe the Brighton game with the wind, with the occasion, maybe that was a bit of an off game. But I did think his overall gameplay, so of course making the saves, but obviously his distribution as well, was much better in this game, and that's the main reason I've given him a 7. But the main thing I've liked about his performances recently, and obviously in this game in particular, is the fact that he looks quite confident. So like I've said in the beginning, whether it's because we've got a new goalkeeping coach, or whether it's just the fact that actually he's playing for a new contract, or whether it's just because he's improving as a player as a whole, whatever it is, he's looking a lot more confident, and obviously that's great because he's putting in good performances here. And now to move on to the right back, Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 4. Had a nightmare first half up against the tricky Roberto Pereira, as he was booked and almost scored an own goal, but composed himself and did improve as the game went on. So Joe Ward here, I've given him a 4, and much like what I touched on with Wayne Hennessy's performance, in the fact that Hennessy had to make a save, otherwise it would have been a Joe Ward own goal. It wasn't really, just that alone in almost scoring an own goal really just sums up if you have a bad game. And overall, I do think his overall performance, bar if you take away that mistake, I just think his overall play was absolutely abysmal in this game. But in terms of the first half, the second half was slightly better, but the first half was in particular when he was at his worst. I think that Pereira's a tricky player and he's got lots of pace, but if you haven't got the pace to match him, then Joe Ward has to try and be clever with his play and actually try and either keep up with him or just mark him very closely so that he won't struggle to catch up with him because he's always marking him. So personally for me, obviously he had a really difficult time marking him, and because obviously a few times he had to pull him down because he got past him, he got booked, and of course obviously with him being pulled out of position from Pereira, he almost scored an own goal. So really for me, it just really sums up what is a bad performance from him. And that's basically following on from the game against Brighton, because I said there was no reason for Aaron Wan-Bissaka to be dropped other than the fact it was for experience in the Derby game. The Derby game's gone now. You bring back Aaron Wan-Bissaka because he's playing fantastic before he got dropped, and there's no reason to do it. And based on this game and the Brighton game, Joe Ward, he looks a bit rusty. Doesn't look like he's up to it at the moment, and it still doesn't look like he's 100% fit. So personally for me, with another performance here following on from that Brighton game, it really just backs up my point in the fact that either he's not fully fit yet, or he hasn't fully recovered from his injury, or it's obviously the fact that maybe he just isn't as good as he used to be. But whatever it is, it really showed in that first half the lack of quality he did have. And I know that Pereira is a good player, and no question about that. Like any fullback's going to find it difficult to deal with him, but I'm sure that Joe Ward, I know he's got a lot of experience, but he should have done better. And personally for me, one of the worst players on the pitch, and ultimately there were lots of people, including myself, calling for him to get taken off within the first half because nothing looked right, he didn't look comfortable. And personally for me, I think it would have been better for him just to get taken out of the team, because quite honestly he was playing really bad. But obviously at half-time, Roy Hodgson rallied the troops, and obviously the first half, Watford were very dominant, but in the second half, Palace were even more dominant than Watford were in the first half. So that just showed that Roy Hodgson got the team rallied up, and once again, like the theme at the beginning of the season, having a bad first half but a better second half, this was exactly the theme here, and Joe Ward was one of these players who improved and composed himself in the second half. And although he did improve as the game went on, he didn't really have a fantastic game. You know, after having such a bad first half, it's going to be pretty hard to pick yourself back up. And although he did improve, he didn't do it quite enough for me to give him a rating higher than a 4. But to be honest, I really do think, you know, I've given him a 4 because of the mistakes he made and how he found it quite difficult to deal with the Watford attackers. But I do think, like I've said already, I do think he struggled quite a lot. Well, I say today, so I wrote this on after the game on Saturday, but he struggled on Saturday. And personally for me, I am in two minds, you know, whether Ward or Wan-Bissaka are better. But when you consider Ward made a mistake against Brighton, and if Wan-Bissaka was dropped, let's forget about the experience, but if he was dropped because of that mistake he made against Bournemouth, then surely they're sort of on even kills in the fact that they've made costly mistakes lately. But surely, because Wan-Bissaka has played a lot better this season and has obviously got a little bit more pace than Ward, surely that edges it in terms of Wan-Bissaka coming back into the side. Because if the reason why Wan-Bissaka was dropped was because he made the mistake, not because he was, you know, tired or fatigued, or the fact that he was taken out for experience, if it was purely based on the fact that he made that costly mistake, then surely Ward and Wan-Bissaka have got to be on the same playing field now, in the fact that they've both made quite costly mistakes lately. But obviously Wan-Bissaka less, because it was his mistake losing the man at the corner, but that's the first mistake he made in however many games he's played in which he's been superb. So personally for me, obviously they've both got their traits which they're good at, but personally for me, I do think Wan-Bissaka does edge it, and he does deserve to go back into the side. And to be honest, after another bad performance from Ward, I would be quite disappointed in Roy Hodgson continuing to play him at right back, when you consider actually that Wan-Bissaka should be back into the side based on his form before he got taken outside, and just based on the fact that this season he's proved why he's a better player. So Joe Ward here, a 4 for him, another disappointing performance. Now to move on to the centre-back James Tomkins, who I'm going to give an 8. Another commanding display at the back for Palace with some vital blocks, challenges and clearances. Also came closest to scoring with his header that came off the post. So James Tomkins here, I've given him an 8, and like he's been for the whole of this season, and obviously certainly in the last sort of few games where he's been immense, he basically continued his form here with another commanding display. And we know what to expect from Tomkins in the fact that he's very consistent and he always performs to the highest standard. But this was another game here where he blew us away with quite a dominant performance. And once again, like I've said with Wayne Hennessy, he did deserve to get the clean sheet. And you know, when you consider looking at the stats, we haven't had that many clean sheets this season. It is about time that our defenders, who have been performing quite well, it's about time that they got some credit with obviously a clean sheet. But once again, James Tomkins, like he always does, obviously he's vital for us at the back in terms of helping us build that solid base to be at the spine of the team. I do think that in this game here, like he always does, lots of blocks, lots of challenges, lots of clearances, so everything you would expect from him, but once again, doing it to the highest standard, making sure that the Watford attackers can't get past him. And I've seen a few people compare the Tomkins and Sakho partnership to a brick wall, and certainly that's what it was in this game, because whenever they played together, and especially in this game here against Watford, they were absolutely solid, and Watford did find it quite difficult to get past them. And you know, if you look at a stat, I think it's 11 times they've played together as a partnership, so Tomkins and Sakho, they haven't even lost a game. I think they've drawn about 7, and obviously they haven't lost any, so that just puts it into perspective. And the fact they've only conceded 7 goals in them 11 games. If you put that into perspective, that just shows you how much of a solid partnership these two are at the back, and how much of, you know, they don't get much credit but in terms of the wider league, but in terms of, you know, our position at the minute, they're actually one of the best defensive partnerships in our part of the league. But in terms of scoring, obviously it was a 0-0 ball draw. Wasn't really much drama in it in terms of, you know, shots on goal, because both teams didn't really have that many, and although Watford controlled the first half, Palace the second half, there still wasn't really much in that domination period of actually chances on goal. So personally for me, Tomkins, the fact that the centre-back from a set-piece came closest to scoring, once again just proves how much of a threat he is. You know, he's not only good defensively, but he can go forward and have a threat there. And you know, his header, once again he's showing that he's a threat from the set-pieces. Lovely header, managed to find space inside the box, headed it down, and was unlucky that it rattled off the post. So that just shows here once again, and like I keep repeating week in, week out, but he's not only a threat, or he's not only defensively solid, but also he can be a threat from set pieces. So it was great to see in a game where neither team had that many goal scoring opportunities. It was great to see Tomkins pop up with a chance, which of course he was unlucky not to score with it coming off the post. But to be honest today, I think he was fantastic in this game, and that's the reason I've given him an 8. But if you there was one late pass I think in the game, I'm not sure exactly where it was, but there was one late pass in the game which was a bit dodgy. But other than that, I think his game was absolutely solid. And in terms of moving away from his performance, obviously before the game, people saw pictures and videos of him without a beard. He's obviously cut off his beard now. He looked like Wolverine. And now he looks like a baby because we're so used to Tomkins having that beard. He shaved the beard off and it makes him look 10 years younger. So hopefully that will just sort of, cutting his beard off will re-energise him and make it seem like as a person he is 10 years younger. Because hopefully that will just help him in terms of, keeping his legs young so he can continue to perform as well as he have. Because certainly with defenders, he's not old, but as defenders get older, their legs start to go, they start to get slower. So maybe Tomkins cutting his beard will maybe speed him up a bit. But personally for me, Tomkins, another assured commanding performance and fully deserving of the 8. Now to move on to Mamadou Sakho, who I'm going to give a 7. Palace were put under considerable pressure, but he held firm alongside Tomkins in a resolute display. So Mamadou Sakho here, I've given him a 7, and much like the performance of Tomkins in terms of making blocks, challenges and clearances, I do think Sakho done exactly that, and in terms of comparing that partnership to a brick wall, I certainly do think that's a great way to describe their performance here. But of course in the first half, Watford were dominating the game and they were putting quite a lot of pressure on Palace, especially our back four. But I do think in terms of keeping it at 0-0 at half time when we played so badly, obviously you've got to give credit to the two centre backs and the goalkeeper for actually how solid they performed in the game. But like I've said, and I say this week in, week out, yes, Sakho's a bit maverick sometimes and he makes mistakes and risky passes here and there, but the majority of the time he holds himself firm, he forms that great partnership, and that's what we saw here against Watford. Yes, he wasn't superb as we've seen last season where he's stopping every cross inside the box, and yes, he let a few go, but overall I do think he was really, really firm alongside Tomkins. And the word I used was resolute because I think that's the best way to describe Sakho's performance in terms of just being resolute, solid at the back. And much like Tomkins, the main important thing for me in terms of keeping defending simple is making sure that you can make blocks, challenges and clearances. And them three things are obviously what Sakho and Tomkins done in that partnership. But the thing that I really like about his game, and this is something we saw against Brighton, against Liverpool, we see this again and again, is Sakho putting his body on the line, and he's done that here a few times against Watford again, which once again, putting his body on the line just proves how much of a warrior he is. The fact that he's willing to give up everything he's got and put every effort into making sure that the opposition won't score. And when you consider we've got another game, a clean sheet, and obviously another point on the board, when you consider that Sakho put his body on the line, that's quite crucial in terms of putting that effort in, and of course you get rewarded with that clean sheet. But the only thing, obviously the downside to his performance, and the main reason I didn't give him an 8, like I gave Tomkins, but I've given him a 7, is the fact that he didn't dominate as much as he has done last season. So we saw last season how much of an influence he can have on the side, and although we've seen that in glimpses this season, he hasn't been as good as he was last season, or whether it's just the fact that Tomkins is playing even more better than Sakho was last season, that actually we're paying less attention to Sakho and he's just getting on with his job, and maybe we're putting loads of praise on Tomkins. But whatever it is, Sakho doesn't seem to be dominating as much as he used to, but that's not really a concern for me because Tomkins is sort of taking that role over. And although he held firm for the majority of the game, I do think there were a few risky passes here and there. But like I said, the word maverick, Sakho sometimes does all these weird and wonderful things. So other than them few risky passes here and there, which ultimately we didn't get punished for, so that's a good thing. But other than that, I do think he had a really, really solid performance. And alongside Tomkins, like I've said, played 11 and won 7, lost none, only conceded 7 goals. That really puts into perspective how much of a solid defensive partnership they are. So Mamadou Sakho here, once again, a 7 for him. Now to move on to the left back, Patrick Kavanagh, who I'm going to give a 5. Wasn't as adventurous as we've seen him in recent weeks from left back, booked for dissent. So Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 5, and you know, if you compare him to Joe Ward had an absolutely terrible game, and that's why I've given him the 4. But on the other hand, Patrick Van Aanholt here, I've given him a 5, and it wasn't the fact that he played terribly, because I think in terms of the clean sheet, he was quite important because he didn't make any mistakes and he was quite solid in that respect. But the main reason I've given him a 5, it was just the fact that it was a little bit disappointing that when you consider how good he's been over the last 2 months, we didn't actually see him go forward as much as he has done in recent games. So when you consider, especially, you know, against Brighton where he was bombing up and down that left flank, we didn't see that in this game here against Watford. And you know, whether that was the game plan from Roy Hodgson just to sit deep and absorb the pressure, or whether it's just the fact that Patrick Van Aanholt wasn't really feeling it and wasn't really attacking down that left hand side as he would normally do, whatever it was, we didn't quite see that. And of course, playing at left back is really important to get forward and help the attackers. So in our case, it would have been Loftus-Cheek on that side. So in terms of that, it would have been better for him to try and go forward and support him more. Of course, we didn't see that, so that was a bit disappointing. But his overall defensive play, you know, there were no glaring errors, no glaring, you know, fantastic tackles or glaring interceptions which he made, which were fantastic. So overall, I do think that although he wasn't great in terms of going forward, I think defensively he done exactly what he had to do, and he's fully deserving of the 5. And of course, he was booked for dissent as well. You know, you can understand him getting a bit frustrated towards the end of the game. You know, Watford flying in with tackles here, there and everywhere, and of course the referee just being absolutely scandalous with some of his decisions. So you can understand a few of the players getting frustrated, so I'm not really too concerned about them getting booked there. But overall, I do think he was okay in the game. You know, wasn't fantastic, but the thing that was really lacking in the game, and this was obviously as a result of him not going forward, it's just the fact that Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who was obviously having a bad game, but he just gave little support to him. So Patrick Van Aanholt, to improve his game, which therefore would have improved Loftus-Cheek's game, it's just the fact that he had to go forward more, because we know how much of a threat he was, but for some reason, whatever it was, he weren't really going forward in this game, and ultimately that resulted in him not necessarily having that attacking force like he normally does, and that was of course disappointing. But to be honest here, Patrick Van Aanholt, a 5, not really too much to add in the fact that his defensive performance was okay, but the thing that was really lacking was that attacking threat, which we know he can have. So hopefully in the next few games, you know, we've got Leicester City coming up, they like to attack on the counter, so hopefully Patrick Van Aanholt can get his groove back and of course go forward and attack. And you know, when you consider he came out and tweeted that he was absolutely peed off with his performance, he's obviously got the right mindset. He, as well as the fans, was disappointed with his performance, so hopefully that will spur him on to next week in what will be a crucial game against Leicester. Now to move on to the midfielder and captain Luka Milivojevic, who I am going to give a 6. Not his best game, but had more influence as the game wore on, as Palace stayed resilient. Almost scored with his superbly taken free kick. So Luka Milivojevic here, I've given him a 6, and when you consider the high standards he's set in the recent weeks, you know, when you consider how well he played against Brighton, Bournemouth, Liverpool, all of these games where he's played fantastically, and of course he's been involved in goals, whether that be obviously with the goals himself, with him scoring, or whether that be with the assists. In the last few games he's been highly involved, but in this game here it was a slightly off game from him, you know, not his best game, but I still feel for as a captain playing in at defensive midfield role, protecting the back four, I still thought he had influence on the game, and that's what you want from a player. You know, if a player's going to have a slight off game where they're not necessarily playing as well as they normally would do, you still want them to have an influence on the game, and I do think defensively in particular, I do think he done a fantastic job there. Now of course I've given him a 6 mainly because it was just an average game from him, but in terms of one highlight of the game which was absolutely superb was the free kick he took. You know, Zaha got fouled by Mariappa just outside the area on that left hand side. Obviously it looked like he was going to chip it in because it was at a difficult angle, but instead Luka stepped up, went to take the free kick, managed to curl it above the ball, and really was unlucky for it to hit the crossbar. So once again showing that actually he's not only fantastic in terms of being that defensive midfielder, but from dead ball situations, whether that be a free kick or a penalty, he's of course got a fantastic shot on him. And you know, I've got to say that in a game where overall he wasn't fantastic and he wasn't as good as he has been in past games, that was really a highlight of the game, and something that really, you know, made me think actually, you know, even though he had a bad game, you've got to give him credit, because actually that free kick from a very difficult angle, most players who are good at free kicks might not get that in, but you know, the fact that he was able to curl it in, unluckily get it off the crossbar, and obviously unlucky that no one else was able to pick up that loose ball, of course it just shows once again how much of a good player he is. And, you know, much like what I say with Wilfried Zaha in terms of even when he has a bad game, he can still influence the game, whether that be, you know, through a goal or an assist. And that was exactly the same here with Luka. You know, he still, you know, he didn't necessarily had a good game. He was quite quiet in the game, but the fact that he's still able to get involved with, you know, a goal-scoring opportunity from a free kick, once again shows how much of a good player he is, in the fact that he can still get involved with chances even when he's not necessarily playing to his best of his ability. So once again, that just shows how much of a good player he is. And in terms of just his overall midfield play, he had little, you know, he played okay, had a little bit of support for the midfield in front of him, so he was all right at supporting Cabaye and MacArthur, and obviously Loftus-Cheek as well. So although he wasn't great in that role, he's still done a little bit there. But it would have been nice to see a little bit more from him, you know, as we've seen in recent games. But like most players, you know, when they have 4 or 5 good games in a row, there's going to be a game where they maybe have an off game or they're a bit low on stamina. And maybe this was just Luka's game here, because we know he normally sets high standards. And obviously this was just one of these games where he was below par. But personally for me, I do think a 6 is a fair result. And like I said already, if that free kick would have gone in, it would have been absolutely superb. Now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I'm going to give a 6. A tenacious display from the Frenchman, who helped Palace to get the ball more in the second half after chasing shadows for much of the first. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him a 6, and in terms of what most people describe the game as, in terms of a game of 2 halves, that was very much the same thing in terms of Cabaye's performance, because although I thought his overall performance was quite tenacious, I do think that actually, especially in the second half, I do think he performed a lot better after, you know, not playing as well in the first half. Now, of course, in that first half, Watford were dominating quite a lot, and in terms of the midfield battle, which I like to talk about, I do think that Watford definitely won that, and because of that, I thought that Yohan Cabaye in particular was chasing shadows for much of that first half. But much like the whole team in terms of having that team talk with Roy Hodgson, coming out refreshed for that second half, I do think actually that he got a lot better in that second half. And the thing in particular I liked is the fact that he got on the ball quite a lot and he was trying to make things happen. So unlike in the first half where he couldn't really get the ball, we didn't really have possession, in the second half when we had a lot more of the ball, he was someone who was trying to actively get on the ball and was of course trying to put the balls forward and try and make things happen. Now, of course, normally this is not really his type of game. You know, we do know that Cabaye likes to be a bit physical, likes to go in for a challenge. But because Watford were playing, you know, quite dominant, and obviously they towards the end of the game they were putting in loads of challenges, this is not really the type of game that Cabaye normally suits. And of course, that was mainly because he was bullied in the midfield, as were the whole midfield. But him in particular, purely because obviously Watford was just slightly better on the day in that department. But I've got to say, you know, towards the end of the game he looked a bit tired, he looked a bit fatigued, and of course he did look like he picked up an injury. But of course Roy Hodgson, being Roy, didn't make a sub for him. He took obviously MacArthur off, but that did surprise me, because I do think although Cabaye can last 90 minutes, it's more like 70 minutes where he's at 100%, and then sort of his fitness and his energy rates do go like to 50% after the 70th minute, just because his legs are going. He can't necessarily last a full 90 minutes anymore. So it would have been nice to see him go off, not because obviously he was playing bad, just because we wanted a few more fresh legs. But he battled through. Obviously it wasn't that serious of an injury, so he just sort of walked it off. And obviously it was of course great to see that he lasted a full 90 minutes, first time he'd done it in a while. And actually, even though we know that he gets a bit tired towards the end of the game and he isn't necessarily that good at lasting 90 minutes, he's still done a job, and that's of course what you want to see from your midfielder. So Yohan Cabaye here, not necessarily having that much impact on the game, but certainly a tenacious display and fully deserving of a 6. Now to move on to James MacArthur, who I'm going to give a 6. The Scottish international showed energy as usual, but wasn't as effective as he can be from midfield. So James MacArthur here with a similar performance to Cabaye in the fact that he wasn't necessarily having that much impact on the game, but he was doing the right thing. So whereas Cabaye was looking to get on the ball as much as possible and of course was trying to make things happen, MacArthur, like he always does, shows a lot of energy, tries to put pressure on the opposition, and although he's playing out of position on that right or left hand flank, wherever he was at that part of the game, I still thought that he done his usual thing in showing energy, but it wasn't necessarily as effective as he can be, and that's purely, in my opinion, is the fact that he's playing out of position. You know, with Benteke just coming back from fitness, not necessarily fitting the winning system we've played recently. Obviously you can understand Roy Hodgson sticking with that winning team from against Brighton, but certainly I do think we need to change up the formation a bit, because with MacArthur playing out wide, he isn't being as effective he can be in the midfield when he's playing out wide as to when he is playing down the middle. So that's something I certainly did pick up on from the game, and I do think that he has to play more central, because obviously he's much better driving through the midfield rather than cutting inside from the wing. Obviously he's not a winger, but obviously I do think that, you know, even though he didn't necessarily have the best game in terms of playing out wide and not being effective, I do think he showed that energy, and that's the main thing for me. If a player's not going to perform fantastic and do fantastic things in the team, you just want them to do the basic things right and just be sort of, you know, sort of have that, I don't know how to describe it, but you know, the MacArthur performance, just to have that determination, just to carry on, and just obviously have that stamina in the midfield. That's the word I'm looking for. Just to have that stamina to carry on and just do your job. That was of course great to see. But like I've said, he does need to be central a bit more, and obviously if he does play central, he obviously wouldn't have to protect the fullback because the winger was there to do it. But with him playing out wide, he does need to protect the fullback a little bit more. And although I said that Ward played badly, and Ward did play badly, it obviously wasn't all down to James MacArthur leaving him exposed. But I think if MacArthur had given Ward a little bit more protection than he did do in the game, then I'm sure both MacArthur and Ward's performances would have improved slightly. But James MacArthur here, nothing really terrible about his performance. Not as good as he usually is in terms of being effective, but I did think that actually he does show energy, which of course for me is one of the most important things. So James MacArthur here, a 6 for him. Now to move on to Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I'm going to give a 5. Had little impact from the midfield in the first half, but got more involved as Palace got a bigger foothold in the game. Not his best game though. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I've given him a 5, and much like the performance of Patrick Vellana, where actually he wasn't necessarily absolutely terrible, but he certainly wasn't necessarily the best player on the pitch, I do think this is one of the mid-ranging performances, an average performance from Loftus-Cheek. And you know, when you consider how good he was against Brighton, and you know how much impact he had in that game, there was quite a lot of expectation coming into this game here against Watford that once again he would be one of the players to get Palace ticking. But ultimately, it was the complete opposite, where he did actually have that. He had a lack of impact on the side, especially in the first half where Watford dominated. And although when we got a bigger foothold on the game, he did slightly improve, I didn't necessarily see as big of an impact or as much ball carrying as we saw last weekend, you know, against Brighton. So personally for me, you know, with that big expectation of coming off the back of a fantastic performance against Brighton, it was definitely disappointing to see that actually he sort of didn't necessarily down tools, but his performance was actually quite a lot less than his first half, or his performance was against Brighton last weekend. Now of course, obviously this isn't his best game, and you could understand the fact that he got bullied in the midfield purely because Watford were just being more dominant, you know, they're being more dominant than us. But I do think that actually with him alongside Joe Ward, he was arguably one of our worst players on the pitch. You know, he wasn't absolutely terrible where every mistake he made was punished, but I do think he did lack that sort of influence in the game that of course you want to see from an attacking midfielder slash wide player, however you want to class him in this sort of 4-4-2/4-2-2-2 formation we're playing. But I do definitely think that actually in the midfield, I think he did get bullied quite a lot, especially up against the dominant midfielders that Watford had. And of course, when under no pressure, he kept giving the ball away quite a lot throughout the game. And obviously, giving the ball away gives away possession. And once again, that was one of the reasons why Watford dominated, is the fact that Loftus-Cheek in the centre of the park kept giving the ball away, when actually he wasn't necessarily under pressure. And basically, because we couldn't string one or two passes together, ultimately meant that actually Watford were able to pass their ways around us. But Loftus-Cheek here, you know, I've seen some people criticise him heavily for his performance, but he is a young player, so he's always learning. But it was a slightly disappointing performance for me personally when you consider how well he's played in previous games. But like I've said, you know, he's you know, been hot and cold for Palace. You know, he's had absolutely fantastic world-class games. Then he's had other games where he gives the ball away. So if he can get somewhere in the middle, and of course against Leicester, he once again is going to be an important player for us. If he can get back to how he was before and get a little bit more consistency with his performances, and of course have an influence on the game, then of course that'd be even better for us. But the main reason I've given him a 5 here is just because he was slightly disappointing, you know, wasn't as good as he has been in previous weeks. And like I said already, the main thing for me which was quite disappointing is when you consider how good he is at carrying the ball, the fact that he gave away possession quite a lot in this game really just shows that it was a slight off game from him. But I'm sure he could have done better. And of course, hopefully in the next few weeks, you know, we've got Leicester, we've got Stoke, we've got West Brom coming up. These are they're 3 really important games. So hopefully if he can pick up his performances again, he'll be a crucial player for us, because we know he's got the quality it was just a slight off game here. So Loftus-Cheek, a 5 for him. Now to move on to Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give a 5. Struggled to have much impact going forward, as Palace were largely on the back foot, and conceded possession cheaply on more than one occasion. So Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 5, and much like the performance of Loftus-Cheek in terms of it, not necessarily being terrible, but not living up to the expectation following on from the Brighton game. That was exactly the thing of that is exactly the theme of Andros Townsend's performance. Now, of course, against Brighton, playing in that front two, him and Wilfried Zaha caused lots of problems for the Brighton defence, and although Watford lined up with a similar formation, which of course made it slightly difficult to play, you know, two strikers up against two centre-backs, but we stuck with that system, and although it worked against Brighton, didn't quite work here, you know, against Watford. And of course, Andros Townsend was one of these players to suffer because he didn't really have that impact going forward. Now, of course, the main reason for that is because Palace were on that back foot, so if you're on the back foot and you haven't got that chance to go forward, then of course the forward players are going to suffer because they can't get forward. But even when we did have chances, especially in that second half where we dominated for large periods, even when that was the case, he still didn't have that influence going forward, which was of course for me slightly disappointing. Now, much like Loftus-Cheek in terms of conceding possession and giving the ball away quite a lot, I do think Townsend done that quite a lot in this game, and normally he's pretty good at holding up onto the ball or finding that good cross or pass. Didn't do that in this game, and that was of course slightly disappointing. And then the disappointing thing is that although that was disappointing, the fact that he kept making that mistake again and again, like Loftus-Cheek in terms of keep giving away the ball, was of course once again not necessarily, yeah, I'll keep using the word disappointing, but really for me that really just sums up his performance, because we know how good he can be, we know how good he is with his pace and energy, but we didn't quite see that in this game. And you know, much like Loftus-Cheek, once again comparing the two players, against Brighton they played so well, and of course it was slightly disappointing that they come into this game the week after that and not necessarily perform to the same standard. But to be honest, he did look a bit tired throughout the game, so you can understand him not necessarily playing to the high intensity that he would normally play, and obviously he did look a bit lost as well, and that once again just highlights that although the 4-4-2 system with Wilf and Townsend can work in some games, actually in others it doesn't work, and especially when a team matches you in terms of a 4-4-2, that definitely doesn't work. So what you've got to do is change to a system which suits the players, and because Hodgson didn't do that, of course it meant that Townsend did look a bit lost at times. But personally for me, you know, I'm not going to necessarily say he had a terrible game, but I did give him a 5 because it was slightly disappointing when you consider the high standards he set, not only against Brighton, but over the course of the whole season. So Andros Townsend here, normally one of our most consistent players, a slightly worse game from him here, but I do think a 5 is a fair result. Now to move on to our final player, Wilfried Zaha, who I am going to give a 5. A frustrating afternoon. He saw little of the ball in the first half and was berated by Watford fans every time he touched the ball. Went down in the box a couple of times and was accused of diving, but did well to maintain discipline after being booked by Chris Kavanagh. Still looked a threat when on the ball. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 5, and much like the whole team in terms of the offensive side, I do think Wilfried Zaha was quite disappointing, and you know, much like what I said with Townsend and Loftus-Cheek, when you consider how well they played against Brighton last weekend, it was obviously quite disappointing for our talisman in Zaha to obviously not play to his best of his ability. And you know, when you consider how much Watford fans hate him, as much as Brighton fans hate him, it would have been nice for Zaha just to give them, you know, a sort of a bit of a revenge and actually just perform absolutely fantastic against Watford, just to show that actually there's no reason whatsoever for them to be booing him. But in terms of the first half, we did see little of the ball, and you know, that was mainly because we were under the cosh. Watford were dominating, so we couldn't really get the ball to the attackers, which basically meant that Zaha didn't get much of the ball in the first half. But the couple of times he did get it, he got booed by the home fans. Obviously Watford, you know, have a big dislike towards Wilfried Zaha, so whenever he had the ball they were berating him, booing every touch of the ball. And of course, you know, on the big occasion that seemed to affect him because he obviously wasn't playing as well as he normally would do, and obviously that must be quite a good example of actually, much like the game at sort of the mid-end of the season when we played Watford and beat them 2-1, it obviously shows that actually, you know, he does get affected by the crowds obviously booing him, and of course once again here against Watford it seemed to have an impact here. Now of course he went down in the box. Now I'm not going to go on too much about this, but the first one in the first half, it wasn't a dive because he obviously got pushed to the ground, but it wasn't a penalty as well. So we end that debate there. It's quite obvious it wasn't a penalty, and it wasn't a dive, so we can move on from that one. The one in the second half, the one that he got booked for, I don't know how he got booked for that, for diving, when you consider there were 3 players around him. Mariappa's absolutely dived into him, slid into him, taken his legs out. That's a definite penalty, and it should be a red card because it's 2 yellow cards. He would have been sent off, so Mariappa should have been sent off there. And of course there were other ones in and around the box, the free kick. They were all fouls because, Watford players obviously tried to kick the hell out of him. They were pushing him to the ground, pulling his shirt, and of course straight away they want to pick him up and say, why are you diving for? When actually he doesn't dive, and as evident here, the agenda against him is absolutely, not fantastic, sorry, it's absolutely huge, because obviously people are saying that he dives when actually it's just a referee booking him for diving, for simulation, when actually, as Mariappa said himself, he shouldn't have been diving in there, and obviously it should have been a penalty. So the first one in the first half, that's debatable. I don't think that's a penalty. I think that's not a dive either. I just think he's been pushed to the ground, not a penalty, but we move on. And in the one in the second half, he got booked for that, but Chris Kavanagh had an absolutely bad game overall. But that in particular, booking Zaha for diving, when actually there were 3 players around him, one of which slid in Mariappa and actually absolutely cleared him out. I just totally don't understand how people can say he's diving. And because of that, and because what people have said on Match of the Day, I'm not going to mention names, but people on Match of the Day, so the agenda against Zaha keeps getting bigger and bigger. And much like he said on Goals on Sunday, which I think was fantastic of Zaha to come out and say, he basically said there's an agenda against me. People want me to get suspended and want me to do that, but whenever anyone else dives, they don't really care. And he's basically said, I don't dive, as evident by the fact that I haven't been, he hasn't obviously been suspended for that. So once again, just showing that not only do we have to stand up for him, but he's coming on national television and saying it himself, because people are following this agenda, following on this bandwagon, and just saying he's a diver when actually he isn't, and it's actually just opposition players kicking the hell out of him. But to be honest, although I've given him a 5 and he wasn't necessarily having as much impact on the ball as he would have liked, I still thought whenever he did get on the ball on the rare occasion, he still did look a threat. But once again, much like the whole team, because Watford were playing quite well, and obviously Palace as well in the second half, they basically sort of equalled out, and he didn't really have that much impact. And of course, because Watford, they kept kicking the hell out of him and double marking them, so really it was quite difficult for him realistically to have much impact on the game. So I do understand his frustrations, but hopefully in the next few games, we've got important games against Leicester, Stoke, West Brom coming up. Hopefully he can get back to his normal self, and once again, like he proved against Brighton, he can continue to put in these fantastic performances. But a 5 for him. A slightly disappointing afternoon for Palace's talisman, but hopefully in the next few games he can build on that fantastic performance against Brighton and help us to push for survival. So Wilfried Zaha here, a 5 for him. So I'm just going to move on to the subs here. Once again, Roy Hodgson doesn't really like making subs, but he made one in this game quite late on in the game in the 80th minute, and that was Christian Benteke coming in for James McArthur. And I'm going to give Benteke a 5, not because he played bad or not because he didn't necessarily do anything good, but it's just purely based on the fact that obviously he came on the pitch, had a little time to make an impact, and in that time he had the time to make an impact because we were playing quite deep, trying to protect that 0-0, that clean sheet. We didn't really get the balls up to him, and ultimately, although people want to absolutely criticise him for his performance, I think given the fact that he was on the pitch for a short time, and the fact that we were trying to protect that 0-0 and trying to obviously not get the ball to Benteke, try and keep possession on our own half, because of that it basically meant that Benteke was restricted. So the reason I've given him a 5 is not because he played badly, purely because he didn't have that much time to make an impact for the game. But to be honest, I personally before the game would have taken a draw. When you consider Watford, they're slightly higher up than us in the table, and they've obviously had a topsy-turvy season, and obviously it'd be nice not to drop points to them. So of course I'm happy with the point, but when you consider it's a game that we could have easily won in terms of getting that penalty and possibly scoring it, but also it's a game that we could easily have lost as well. So that just puts it into perspective that actually a point is a fair result when you consider that Watford, with the amount of chances in the first half, could have won, and obviously in the second half, with the amount of chances we had and the penalty we should have had, obviously that sort of evens it out. And when you consider the game as a whole, first half it's like a game of 2 halves. First half we were very poor, but in the second half we got a lot better. Yes, we weren't great, but actually we were a lot better and probably the better team in that second half, and obviously that was great to see. But to be honest, for me, there's a slight dilemma now in terms of Zaha and Townsend. For a few games they do work well up top together, and as seen against Chelsea, as seen against Brighton, it does work.
But personally for me, I think that although they can play a couple of games up front, it's not necessarily a final thing that we should be doing week in, week out, because occasionally, because that's not their normal natural positions, they do look quite lost. And especially on Saturday against Watford, I do think they looked quite lost. And when you consider the pace and the ability of the crossing ability that both Zaha and Townsend possess, surely it'd be better to bring Benteke back into the side and go to a more solid 4-5-1, or maybe even a 4-4-2, but move Townsend back out wide and leave Zaha up front with Benteke or even Sorloth, and try and move back to a system where players don't look lost and actually we can still have a bigger impact on the game. Because although it works against some teams, when you've got someone like Watford who don't necessarily play quite open at the back, they like to be quite tight and in the midfield as well. When you've got a team like that, you've got to attack them with only one striker and actually just whip loads of balls into the box and hope someone gets their head on it, rather than trying to play expansive football with the likes of Townsend and Zaha up front. Because against a back two with possibly a back four or back four in the midfield in front of them, it's not necessarily going to work. So personally for me, I do think that actually going forward, although it works in some games, against certain formations it works, but for the majority of the games it doesn't work. So in order to stop Zaha and Townsend looking lost in games, we've of course got to move to a better system. And of course do feel free to comment below with your views on that formation. Now the final thing from me is, I've talked about it already, but we've got Leicester City, Stoke City and West Brom coming up. Two of the games against teams in the bottom three already, in the bottom three at the moment, and of course Leicester, who are safe, they're fine, and they're just sort of coasting at the minute. So we've got 3 massive games left. So hopefully, if we can continue with good performances and not have games like Watford where we only perform good for one half, then hopefully the results will come. And hopefully, it's looking close now, but hopefully with a few more results, we can confirm our safety. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award. But before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, I thought the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. So when you consider it was a game of 2 halves, where the first half we were playing absolutely terribly and obviously Watford dominated, and of course the second half where we improved quite a lot and actually did pose a slight threat to Watford in that half in comparison to the first half, you can understand actually it being quite difficult to pick players for the shortlist. And obviously, as you heard in the play ratings, only a few players got 6s and 7s, which really just shows how much of a sort of a lacklustre performance it was from Palace. But in terms of the nominations, I've picked out 4 players. You may not agree with me in particular, but do comment below if you do disagree or even if you do agree. But the 4 nominations are Wayne Hennessy, James Tomkins, Mamadou Sakho and Yohan Cabaye. So in terms of Wayne Hennessy, the one thing in particular which was quite good in terms of quick reactions is the fact that when Joe Ward made that mistake, which was looking like it was going to go into for an own goal, the fact that Hennessy was able to react quickly and actually save that and keep it at 0-0 was of course great to see. When you consider that a player makes an impact to keep at a crucial point to keep the game at a 0-0 or to preserve your lead, that's of course is very important, hence why Hennessy is on the shortlist. But also there are a few good saves here and there as well, which in terms of keeping us in the game and keeping it at 0-0, he was of course quite important in that. So for me personally, although there weren't any fantastic world-class saves, or he wasn't necessarily, I don't know how to describe his performance, but the fact that he was able to rise above it when players made mistakes and obviously make mistakes, and he was able to make the saves, and the fact that he was able to be commanding in his area and make sure that the Watford players couldn't get goals past him, that was of course great to see. Now of course Wayne Hennessy's performance was great, but that was because the 2 men in front of him were absolutely solid. Again, James Tomkins, week in week out he's on this shortlist, but once again another commanding solid performance from him at the back. Blocks, challenges, clearances, whatever you want a defender to do, he done exactly that to the highest level, and that's why he's on the shortlist. Obviously Mamadou Sakho, like we know he always does, even though we were under intense pressure, especially in the first half, he still defended really, really well. Alongside Tomkins, was resolute in terms of stopping all of the chances that Watford had, and also he put his body on the line, which is the main thing for me. That's his main reason he's on the shortlist for the Man of the Match. It's just the fact that whatever Watford threw at us, he made sure that he put his body in the line to make sure that whatever Watford had didn't come to anything. So that's a really important thing for me. And of course Yohan Cabaye, this was one I debated with. I like to have 4 nominations and I couldn't really think of one. But I'm going to put Kabay here because I think his performance was tenacious. I do think, especially in the second half, he helped us to get on the ball and he was looking to get things happening. And that's the main reason he's on the shortlist for me personally. It's just the fact that even though we weren't playing great, he was still trying to get hold of the ball and of course get things going for us. But personally for me, I do think these 4 players do deserve to be on the shortlist. You know, Hennessy for the saves he made, especially the one from Joe Ward's mistake. Obviously Tomkins and Sacco for being absolutely solid at the back once again. And of course from Yohan Kabay, even though we were under pressure in the midfield, the fact that he was able to obviously get on the ball and create chances was of course great to see. But for me, much like there is every week, there is a clear winner, and that is for me, James Tomkins. So congratulations, James. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was another solid performance from you. And the thing really for me that edges it is, you know, in terms of the player ratings, I gave him an 8 as opposed to a 7 I gave to Hennessy and Sacco, and obviously the 6 I gave to Kabay. But the thing that edges it is just the fact that how commanding he was in the side. The fact that, yes, Sacco was great in parts, but the fact that Tomkins was just consistent throughout the whole game, put in loads of blocks, challenges and clearances, and his overall play was very commanding. That was of course great to see, and that's what sees him edge it. But also the fact that he had one of our only chances on goal that hit the post. The fact that he's able to offer a threat, you know, offensively, as well as do a really fantastic, solid job defensively. That is of course great to see as well. So I do think that all of these players do deserve credit for their performances in the game. But special mentions to James Tomkins, who wins this week's Man of the Match award with what was another fantastic performance from him. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my Man of the Match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic and James McArthur following the game.
Luka, how important was that point today?
It was important. If you see 90 minutes, then we can say first half maybe they deserve to score. Second half we were a much better team. We had a few very nice chances, one crossbar, one post, and in the end I think both teams deserve point.
You mentioned the crossbar. Did you think that was going in when you struck it?
Yeah, I thought he put the ball a little bit closer, but you know, it was crossbar. I hope to score, but in the end it's fine. Continue.
What do you think the difference was in the second half? It was a much better performance.
We had a big discussion on the half time. We know we didn't do our job in the first half. They started much better in the game. They took many challenges 50-50, and we should change that in the second half, and we started to play much better.
Saw the penalty appeal and Wilfried was booked there. Did you manage to see the incident?
From my point of view, that was penalty, but you know, the referee is the main guy who take decision, and he decided to give him a card, and that's it.
And so just finally, it's another point on the board. So I guess from now to the end of the season, the trick is to just keep on picking up points like today.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. The point away is good now. We have three games left, 2 at home, 1 away, and I think we have a good chance to take more points.
James, it's a point. How big a point is that in your quest?
It's a massive point. First half we weren't good enough really, so we obviously upped it the second half, and unfortunate not to get a goal, but away to Watford's a good point.
What did the boss exactly say at half-time?
He wasn't really happy with our performance, so he let us know that and demanded a lot more, and second half we went out and gave him a lot more.
You've got a player in Wilfried Zaha that's always going to be the centre of attention one way or another. Has he been a bit unfortunate today, in the Crystal Palace dressing room's opinion?
I'm not sure. I've not seen the penalty back, but I'm sure Watford targeted him a wee bit, as a lot of teams will do, as he's a main threat.
3 games left. What's the mentality? What's the approach?
Obviously try and win every single game. We'll go into the next one focused. We'll go with momentum now. Even though it's only a point, it keeps the momentum and that run going. So
it's 6 points the gap. Is it enough as it stands, or do you need more?
We need to keep fighting for every single point, and we'll do that in the next game.
Roy, a good point away from home today. Is it fair to say a better second half performance than the first?
Oh, clearly, because the first half performance was nowhere near good enough. You know, we were bullied and beaten to the ball, out-muscled for a lot of the game. We think that, you know, we didn't get a lot of help from the referee in that situation, and we think he allowed, you know, a little bit too much aggression at times. But it was a good lesson for us to learn that, you know, there's no point bleeding about that. You've got to do something about it. And had we continued in the second half as we did continue in the first, as we played in the first half, we'd have lost the game quite comfortably. I'm sure of that. But second half, we started to match their determination, match their attitude, and match their aggression, pass the ball quicker, and as a result, of course, the quality that we have in the teams, with some good quality players, started to show. And I think, as much as they would come in at half-time thinking we should be in the lead, I think we can quite happily say that with our second half performance we were unlucky not to win it, especially given the fact that there was, in our opinion, and I don't think it's too one-eyed, a clear-cut penalty on Wilfried Zaha, which saw him booked, rather than seeing the ref give the penalty, which might have won us the game.
Yeah, it's very unfair on Wilf, that. And do you think it's frustrating that he has this reputation outside of Crystal Palace?
Well, it is, but we know where it comes from. You know, it's come sometimes from other managers, you know, trying to gain an advantage by putting in the referee's mind that he's a cheat. We know he isn't, absolutely. We know he isn't. In fact, quite the opposite. I think there are times when he tries so hard to stay on his feet, he might have been better off taking the foul. But there's nothing we can do about that. Reputations come from the outside, but I know that the man is not a cheat by any stretch of the imagination. I also know that diving doesn't feature in his repertoire, and I can only hope that other people will listen also to my opinion on the subject and not take the opinion of people who've got a vested interest in saying that he does dive.
So a point on the board, 3 games to go, 2 of them at home. It's a good position to be in, isn't it?
Well, it's a damn sight better than we were in after 7 games, that's for sure. You know, that was, you know, at that stage, if someone had said then, well, with 3 games to go, you will be clear of the relegation zone. You will have 3 matches left to play. They will be at home. And furthermore, you'll have gone through a very bad injury situation and period, but that will have cleared up and you'll have a decent squad to choose from. I think we'd have all said, well, if we can't get out of it in that situation, then we don't deserve to. So it is in our hands. It's far from being a fait accompli at this particular moment in time, but we know that we have the opportunity. We know that our fate is with us, and if the players show the determination allied to the quality of football that we're capable of, that they saw in the second half, I think we'll do it.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Luka Milivojevic and James MacArthur had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Watford. But make sure to come out next week for my post-match review of the game against Leicester. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.